Hi and welcome to this interview today within the research project Cultural Transmission of Actor Training Techniques. It is a pleasure today to have with us Professor Sergei Tcherkasski, who is the head of the acting studio at the Russian State Institute of Performing Arts in St. Petersburg. And Professor Tcherkasski is here with us thanks to the support of the Department of Theatre Studies at the University of Malta and the Russian Center for Science and Culture in Malta. May I ask you to start by talking a little bit broadly about your career, to introduce your career, especially the major milestones in relation both to your work as a director, but also in relation to your formation.
Yes, first of all, thank you for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be here in the University of Malta. I have graduated St. Petersburg University with Master in Physics. And the same year, I was enrolled into the Director's Program of Theatre Arts Academy in St. Petersburg, which is the eldest theatre educational institution in Europe. It was founded in 1779. I have graduated in the year 1985, and since then, I'm directing in professional theatres in St. Petersburg, in Moscow, in different cities of our country. And from 1991, I'm teaching at the Academy. Theatre Arts Academy is now called Institute of Performing Arts. So I'm the head of acting studio already for some 20-something years. And I'm responsible for educating young actors there.
And in relation to your training then, for example, at one point with the students, you mentioned that you worked under Mar Sulimov.
Yeah, my teacher was Mar Sulimov, who was a disciple of Valentin Smyshlyaev, and in his own turn, he was a student of Stanislavski in the time of the first studio. So it's a kind of a direct lineage from Stanislavski to a generation of practitioners of my age, and I have all the time proud that I have only 3 virtual handshakes between me and Stanislavski. In Russian system, the person who is called artistic director of studio, that is the person who is responsible for training of actors or directors for the whole 4 years, starting from initial exercises of the first year till the diploma productions.
In fact, we are mentioning now actor training, and you already mentioned that you are the head of the acting studio. What are the main lines of work at the studio? How do you train your actors?
It's quite a tough training because it's combined university program and vocational program. So students are working from 9 in the morning till 10 in the evening. And when they start to cry about their life, we said, okay, you will have time to rest after you will graduate. And so the program consists of acting 6 hours per day, movement, voice and speech, dance, and all other training, special training programs. And students are educated in the groups because till nowadays the vast majority of Russian actors work in the permanent companies. That means that they have contracts for a year or sometimes contracts for 3 or 5 years, and they really consider permanent company kind of their artistic home. And so education in the institute, in the academy, somehow reflects this structure of professional theater world. So students are staying in one group for 4 years. From the second year, we already do have some productions which are kept in repertoire, another ability, because it's important that they are able to perform production for years and years. One of my productions in St. Petersburg Theatre ran for 16 years. So you can imagine that it's quite another experience when you are performing play for such a long time.
Of course. In fact, this is very interesting, the way you are talking about the context in which you work, because the impression I have is that the Russian tradition is structured in such a way that in many cases it allows the rehearsal process to be, for example, 1 year long. Like that's a very intensive and rigorous and detailed rehearsal process. Underpinned, of course, by the work of Stanislavski. But when Stanislavski is adopted then in the West, 1 year of rehearsal process is impossible, it's unheard of. Rehearsals would be 3 weeks, 6 weeks. And what do you think about this wide difference in rehearsal time How can Stanislavski be applied within such diverse contexts?
I think he might be fully applied. And that's a very good question of yours, because you need to be reminded that life of an actor in European, United Kingdom or Maltesian style of producing performances is very different, very differently structured from life of Russian actor. So if you are the member of permanent company, that means that you are rehearsing in the morning and you are performing production in the evening. And there are some 30 productions in repertoire in the theater. So today you are in the Seagull, tomorrow you are in Hamlet, and so on and so forth. So out of my own experience, let's say 4 or 5 weeks of intensive rehearsal in the British system is equivalent for 3 or 4 months in Russian system, because when you are only rehearsing the play, you're absolutely immersed to this. And I do remember that when I was directing in RADA, in Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, for the first of my production, they make kind of exclusion, they support me, they give me additional time. It was a very special project when some Russian students were involved. And for the second production, I've asked them, could you please treat me as a British director? So no excuses that I need additional time or some additional conditions, because I would like to check how it works. And I can assure you that the rehearsal was 5 weeks, I assume, 5 or 5.5 weeks. And we start with the same type of etudes which I was doing and in Russia. And students at the beginning, they were a little bit nervous. Oh, we are not really doing blockings or mise-en-scenes, we are wasting time. But then after this first week of immersion through etudes, through Stanislavski-based approach, the whole work went quite quickly and artistically quickly, not just technically quickly. So the main thing, you can't compare just weeks. And you know, each system have both sides, both negative and positive sides. Immersion, complete immersion, when you are rehearsing for intensive 6 weeks or 5 weeks, and opportunity to reflect upon what you are doing when you have a longer period.
Thank you. We are undertaking this interview right after the conclusion of the Stanislavski Symposium, the S-word Stanislavski Symposium that was held in Malta just a few days ago. You might remember that during the conference, a question was raised, like, we've been studying Stanislavski for 80 years now, a century perhaps, and we have uncovered a lot of details of his work, of his life, but with a person like Stanislavski, areas of work, areas of research still tend to have been neglected by us researchers. I'm asking this question to Professor Tcherkasski because he's also a very important researcher on Stanislavski's work. One of his last books, in fact, was a very detailed book about Stanislavski and yoga, for example. The question that I wanted to ask you is, what do you think are the areas in Stanislavski's studies that we have tended to neglect, that are like areas that are awaiting our investigation?
Again, a very interesting question, because I feel that actor training throughout years goes in a kind of a pendulum movement. And this movement is not the same in Russia and abroad. Translation issues, emphasis on some problems connected with this or that type of theater. So out of conference, I've noticed that a lot of ideas about action analysis, which we discussed, were new to our European and British and American colleagues. While in Russia, it's already an established technique from 60s, and now when all of us are trained and skillful in this approach, we somehow have a thirst for conquering new territories. And the pendulum movement moves into direction not of action approach, but improvisational approach, immediacy of performance, work of 5 senses. And on this wave, with this movement of pendulum, works of Nikolai Demidov became in the focus of attention only at the beginning of 21st century in Russia. luckily, his works are now translated into English as well. In 2018, I assume,
yes,
a couple of years ago. And it also, this movement of pendulum of acting, of training of actors, brought interest to early Stanislavski. That was the result of my, that was the reason of my interest in connection of Stanislavski and yoga. So, for example, in Russian theater world, I somehow proposed the slogan that we need to move forward to early Stanislavski, because the experience of the first studio, which gave birth for such an amount of fantastic actors of Russia and of world theater, need to be explored more in more details.
I would like to thank Professor Tcherkasski for being with us today. So thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to talk with you and to be here.